In a large, dark room of a five-star hotel, the curtain was firmly closed. Dirty dishes were scattered on the table. Red wine had spilled over the floor, which had totally soaked the carpet. In the dim light, two figures could be seen on the messy bed. The woman dug her fingers into the man's hair and gave in to his power. She completely lost herself to hot pleasure as her body shook with desire. She had been looking forward to this moment for a long time. How could she easily let him go this time? Her charming body rippled. She tried her best to follow him and wanted to keep him. The man tightly hugged the woman, and they tossed around on the bed for hours. It appeared that he was also beginning to sink into the moment. Either that, or he was drunk now and didn't know who she was, and so it no longer mattered to him. The noises that could be heard from outside the room were unbearably painful for the listener. Sarah sat on the sofa outside. She could clearly hear the sound from the room, even without looking towards it. The door was open, so she could see them from the mirror on the opposite wall. Her heart was broken. The man inside was her boss, and she loved him dearly. The woman inside the room was his mistress. She couldn't say anything about what they did in the hotel because she was just a secretary, inferior to a mistress. Why did he show it to her? Why? He clearly knew she loved him. Sarah grasped the sofa tightly and dug her fingernails into the leather. Despite how sharp the pain was that now coursed through her fingers, it failed to distract her from the deeper pain in her heart. Finally, the alarm clock on the coffee table rang. It had been requested by Charles. He needed to leave the hotel at 3 o'clock because he had an important meeting in half an hour. As his secretary, Sarah must remind him. Even if he had a private rendezvous with his mistress, Sarah had to follow him. She couldn't understand why he wanted her to see that scene. Even if he didn't love her, he could at least consider her feelings, Sarah thought to herself. Sarah held back her tears, but it was futile. She quickly wiped her tears away, tidied herself up, and plucked up the courage to walk into their room. She dared not even look at them. She just knocked on the door and politely announced, "Sir, it's 3 o'clock. We need to go back to the office." It seemed that they were both satisfied. Thomas Charles was lying on the bed and smoking. His chiseled face could be clearly seen in the dim light. He was so handsome and perfect, particularly when smoking. His messy hair also made him even sexier. He heard her words, but he didn't look at her. Instead, he simply replied in a low and hoarse voice, "I see." The woman who was lying on his chest suddenly hugged him and said, "Charles, don't leave me now. Could you stay for a while? You are so powerful today, and I want so much more." Charles extinguished the cigarette and turned around to playfully tap her on the nose. "Well, my baby, I know you need more, but I can't be with you today. I'll come to see you later." His tone was so gentle, like a good lover, much better than the way he talked to Sarah. Sarah lowered her head the entire time. She felt even worse because she knew he had the capacity to be gentle, but would only behave that way with women who weren't her. The woman continued to flirt with him. The next moment, he pinned her down again and kissed her for a while, ignoring Sarah. Sarah's patience had been worn thin and said in a cutting tone, "Sir, I am waiting for you outside." Immediately afterward, she walked out of the door. Charles glanced at the door with a smug look on his face as Sarah left. After a while, he got out of bed and got dressed. The woman also followed him and moved to tie his necktie for him. However, when he looked at Sarah, who was sitting on the sofa with her head lowered and gradually tearing the sofa apart, he pushed the woman's hand away and said, "You can leave now. Let her come in to dress me." The woman was unwilling to do it. "Charles, please let me help you. How can other women do these things?" Unexpectedly, he suddenly became cold. "Get out." His eyes looked fierce and completely different from how they'd been after making love. The woman was frightened. She was aware of his temper, so she didn't dare anger him further and left. After she walked out, she turned to Sarah and said, "The boss has ordered you to dress him." Sarah stood up and watched the woman go. She clenched her fist before she went into the messy room. She still had her head lowered and kept silent. Charles looked at her, smiling. "Come here and dress me." She clenched her fist again and then walked over to him. She told herself to focus only on his clothes so that she couldn't see anything that would hurt her. However, when buttoning up his clothes, she was able to see red marks under his shirt and the woman's lipstick. She couldn't keep herself from crying. He lifted her chin and squinted. "What's wrong? Why are you so sad?" She gritted her teeth and turned her head away from him. Charles sneered at her, provocatively. "Don't you allow me to touch you. Why do you look like you're in such pain when I make love to other women?" She didn't say anything but answered in her mind, "I love you, but I don't want to be your mistress. I just want real love. If you can do that, I can give you everything, including my body. Why do you want my body just like you want other women? Why do you sully my love?" Charles, however, could not read her thoughts and continued to stare at her. "Or are you jealous? In fact, had you imagined replacing that woman so you could lie underneath me?" "No." She finally turned to look at him in the face. He squinted and continued to play with her chin. "It's just because you have never felt that. You love me. Haven't you ever thought about lying under me one day? How about trying it today?" She suddenly raised her hand and slapped him. Her slap left a red handprint on Charles' face. He held his face and stared at her. Sarah stared back at him with her eyes full of tears. She didn't understand why he always played with her feelings. Didn't he know his actions could break her heart? Regardless of how extreme her reaction might have been, Sarah didn't regret what she had done. Noticing her hard expression, Charles squinted at her with a sense of danger in his eyes. Suddenly, he pulled her back to the bed, pinned her down, and began to take off her clothes. Sarah screamed, "Charles, what are you trying to do? Let me go, let me go." She struggled and pushed him, but failed, because Charles was now drunk, and a lot stronger than she was. Charles restrained her with even more force. Her jacket was torn off along with her suit dress, both of which were no longer wearable. Despite her struggles, he removed all of her clothes except her underwear and knickers. Her chest, however, was now also half exposed from the struggle. Sarah noticed a moment of opportunity and bit Charles' arm, which made him immediately loosen his grip. She quickly took this chance to escape. When she had almost crawled to the end of the bed, she was grabbed by Charles again. He pinned her down firmly. "You want to run?" His tone was chilling, resembling a sinister wolf. With tears cascading down her face, Sarah cried out, "Let me go, Charles! What the hell are you trying to do?" Charles looked at her. His breath tickled her soft skin. His half-naked body was undeniably sexy, and he clearly felt as though he was seducing her. "What am I doing?" said Charles hoarsely. "I just want to see your body and know how precious it is that even I can't touch it." He looked over her whole body greedily. Suddenly he smiled. "Well, I can imagine how beautiful your body is. Except for being too thin, your figure is more beautiful than many other women. It's a pity that you usually wear such conservative clothes." Charles' words sounded like a taunt, especially during such a violent interaction. Sarah felt ashamed, uncomfortable with how he objectified her. Still, she struggled. "Let me go. You are an absolute bastard, a beast." She was so angry that her voice was beginning to tremble. Hearing her words, Charles sneered. "A bastard, a beast? If you scold me as a bastard after this, then what will you call me in the future? This is nothing. What else do you want?" "Let me go!" cried Sarah. Charles moved in close to her, bewitched her. "Sarah, don't you really want me at all? You say you love me, but you don't want me?" His other hand began to rub against her body, starting at her face and then down her neck, her clavicle, until it reached her breasts. Sarah was completely terrified and cried out, "Let me go! Don't touch me!" Charles, however, continued to squeeze her breasts and seduce her. "You really don't want me, but you are trembling and you enjoy it. Sarah, why do you always cheat yourself?" His body was slowly getting closer to her, with his hands continuing to grope her body. Sarah was trembling. Although she was both furious and upset, she still couldn't help but shudder whenever he touched her. She suddenly felt as though she was very cheap. Why couldn't she resist his bewitchment? Then Charles began to kiss her, and his breath felt warm against her skin. At last, he hugged her so tightly that neither of them was able to move an inch. Sarah struggled, but she still couldn't resist his warm embrace. Though her body responded to his seduction, her heart was still broken. She was unwilling to give herself to him, especially after he had made love with another woman just moments before in this tainted bed. When she thought about it, she struggled even more severely and screamed, "Let me go!" Charles had thought that she was willing to accept him before, but now her struggle was more desperate and forceful. This made him angry. He didn't know what had happened to that woman. Why did she always resist him? Now she had annoyed him again, and this time he wouldn't let her go. He wouldn't allow her to escape after seducing him. He grappled her even more tightly with both his hands and his legs. His movements became wilder and more unpredictable. Sarah realized that she couldn't move at all, and Charles had no intention of letting her go. A feeling of helplessness overwhelmed her, sending her into even deeper despair. Charles' head moved further downward, allowing Sarah to breathe finally. However, she was so tired that now she could only sob, "Let me go. Please don't treat me like this. I don't want to do anything with you on another woman's bed." Nevertheless, Charles was unable to hear what she said and continued his assault. Sarah continued to cry with her hands tightly clenching the sheet. Finally, she said, "You treat me like an animal. I will never forgive you. Not for the rest of my life. I won't forgive you. I won't forgive you for the rest of my life." It seemed as though this sentence was now all that she could say, so she repeated it again and again. Charles finally listened to it. He raised his head and looked into her eyes, which were filled with tears and anger. He was in shock, pinched her chin, and then asked, "Why do you hate me so much? I won't forgive you for all my life." Sarah, whose eyes were now cold with hopelessness and fear, continued to repeat it. After looking at her for a long time, Charles himself didn't even know how to feel. Suddenly, he banged his fist angrily on the bed, stood up, and glared at her. Looking at her naked body, he took a deep breath to suppress his desire, then quickly turned around to leave the room. Soon, the sound of running water could be heard from the bathroom. Sarah was lying on the bed, with tears still pouring down her face. After she had recovered a little, she turned around and used the sheet to cover her body. She didn't know what to do. She loved him and wished desperately for some kind of romantic love. Charles, however, had always insulted her and treated her this way. She really didn't know how long their seesaw game could last. The dim light did little to fight off the darkness of the night, nor the shadow on her heart. Located in the golden section of this city, the office building of Thomas Corporation stood 80 stories tall. With a high density of businesses and busy traffic, the land in this area was so expensive that only Thomas Corporation could have the ability to buy this building as its headquarters. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it was the busiest time in the office. In the office building, the sound of typing at computers formed a consistent drone throughout the day. Sometimes white-collar workers holding documents passed by, all of them in a frantic hurry. In the central conference hall, which was located on the top floor, Charles, the president, was having a meeting with the senior management staff. Sarah was waiting outside, with a folder in her arms. Leaning against the wall, she did little except stare at the clock, watching time pass by. She didn't know what she would do about Charles. After a long time of knowing each other, he clearly didn't love her, without any regard for her feelings at least. Perhaps he was just interested in her body, which was only due to the pleasure he got from conquering women. Sarah, however, still liked him a lot. 1 year ago, Sarah attended an interview to work for this company. The final interviewer was Charles. When she had met him, he was reclining on his chair with his fingers interlocked on his abdomen. He was so casual, and it was his casual attitude that made him distinctive. His eyes were so delicate, his thin lips were slightly exposing his beautiful teeth. Under the sunlight, he appeared to be an impossibly handsome man. From that moment, she was attracted to him. After the interview, she became his personal secretary, so she had more opportunities to be in contact with him and marvel at his outstanding business talents. Eventually, she fell in love with him. A man of such high quality was always easy to be loved by women, and Sarah was no exception. It had never occurred to her, though, that he was a devil. He knew she loved him, but he still toyed with her emotions, as if he was happy to see that she lived an unhappy life. She thought about the situation at the hotel again. Her body was still bruised from his love bites, while the faint scent of humility lingered on her skin. She bowed her head timidly, with her hands clutching the folder and pen tightly. She didn't know why she still persisted. If she continued to stay here, he would only bully her even more. She had already been desperate this morning. Would she still wait for that cruel-hearted man? Was it all worth it? Sarah thought for a long time. Then she looked at the closed door of the conference hall, and there was no sign of anyone about to leave. She bit her lower lip and finally turned around to go back to her office, sure that she had made up her mind. She had decided that she was going to resign. She must leave him. She would no longer stay here and be humiliated. Once she was back in her office, Sarah began to write her letter of resignation. While she was writing it, her eyes began to well up with tears. She had persisted for a whole year, and after all that, she was giving up. However, what could she do if she didn't give up? That man had never loved her. After finishing the resignation letter, she found a box and started to put all her things. "What else do you want?" "Let me go!" cried Sarah. Charles moved in close to her, bewitched her. "Sarah, don't you really want me at all? You say you love me, but you don't want me?" His other hand began to rub against her body, starting at her face and then down her neck, her clavicle, until it reached her breasts. Sarah was completely terrified and cried out,